Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of scene 1 at around 1,000 words. The late afternoon sun hung low over the horizon, casting long streaks of gold and amber across the cracked asphalt of the small town diner parking lot. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow, where the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee mingled with the dusty scent of the road. A teenage girl sat perched on a low stone wall outside the diner, her legs dangling just above the gravel. She hugged herself, the oversized leather jacket she wore pulled tight against the chill of the evening breeze. It wasn't hers, she'd borrowed it from her older brother, but it fit just right, like a piece of armor. Her backpack rested against the wall beside her, frayed and well used, a quiet testament to the miles she'd walked to reach this moment of solitude. The sound of engines braking the calm was sudden and sharp. A group of bikers rolled into the parking lot like a storm arriving without warning, their machines glinting under the waning sunlight. Chrome and leather shimmered, each bike a statement of dominance, each rider exuding a dangerous charisma. The girl felt her stomach tighten as their laughter and banter filled the air, a mixture of bravado and intimidation. She looked down at the gravel beneath her sneakers, hoping to be invisible, hoping they wouldn't notice her. But notice her they did. The tallest of the group, a man whose scarred cheek made him look perpetually dangerous, pointed directly at her jacket. "Hey, look at that!" he bellowed, his voice a harsh contrast to the peaceful hum of the evening. "What is that, kid? Your dad's old prom jacket?" The laughter that followed was loud, sharp, and cruel. The girl's heart pounded against her ribs. She could feel the eyes of all 6 bikers on her, scrutinizing every detail of her clothing, her posture, her very presence. It was as though they were trying to measure her worth in their own twisted terms, and she was coming up short. Her hands gripped the edges of the leather jacket, the worn material creaking softly under her fingers. "Seriously," another biker sneered, leaning against his machine with an air of mockery, "who even wears that these days? Looks like you're auditioning for a costume party, not standing out here on your own." Her cheeks burned, not just from embarrassment but from the rush of anger that flared beneath her chest. She wanted to run, to melt into the shadows, to disappear behind the diner walls and pretend none of this had happened. But there was a part of her that stiffened, that refused to let their mockery have the power it wanted. Slowly, deliberately, she stood. The jacket shifted against her shoulders, the leather soft and familiar, a piece of history that carried weight beyond its appearance. She took a measured step forward, and the sound of scuffed sneakers against gravel seemed louder than it should have. Every eye in the parking lot tracked her movement, the laughter fading slightly as curiosity replaced ridicule. Then, she turned. She rotated slowly, giving the bikers a full view of the back of her jacket. The patch on it, a brightly colored, intricately embroidered emblem, dominated the worn leather. It depicted a winged skull, sharp and detailed, and beneath it were the bold letters, Iron Raven's MC. Her older brother's club, notorious in the town for loyalty, toughness, and an uncompromising code, was emblazoned across her back. The effect was immediate. The bikers froze mid-motion, their laughter cutting off abruptly. The scarred man's eyes widened, his posture stiffening as if someone had slammed a hand into his chest. His friends instinctively straightened, hands hovering near the grips of their bikes, tension coiling in the air like a taut spring. The girl's heartbeat thundered in her ears, but outwardly she remained calm, her voice low, steady, carrying the weight of unspoken authority. "You boys should be careful who you laugh at," she said, tilting her chin ever so slightly upward. "Iron Ravens don't take kindly to disrespect." The silence was absolute. The roar of engines seemed distant now, muffled beneath the weight of realization. The bikers had been brimming with confidence moments ago, smug in their superiority, but now they looked uncertain, caught in a moment they hadn't anticipated. There was a subtle shift in the air, a tangible acknowledgement that this girl, small and young as she appeared, was connected to a world they understood only superficially, a world that demanded respect. "Wait," the scarred man muttered, stepping forward cautiously, as though approaching a wild animal rather than a teenage girl. He squinted at the patch, his brow furrowing, disbelief flickering across his features. The others exchanged quick glances, silently communicating that they hadn't expected this. They had underestimated her entirely. The girl's gaze didn't waver. Her eyes held a quiet fire, one that spoke of knowledge, experience, and inherited authority. She was alone here, yes, but not powerless. The legacy stitched onto her jacket gave her a presence that belied her age, a shield that turned their mockery into hesitation. The youngest biker in the group, a kid barely out of high school himself, swallowed audibly. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, eyes darting between the girl and the patch. she's serious, he muttered under his breath, as though afraid to speak any louder. Serious doesn't even begin to cover it, the scarred man said, his voice lower now, edged with caution. He looked around at his friends, who had all taken a subtle step back, their earlier arrogance replaced by uncertainty. The parking lot, once dominated by their confidence, now felt different, smaller, subdued, charged with a new, unspoken respect. The girl's hands relaxed at her sides, her shoulders straightened, and she took a measured breath. She didn't need to say more. The patch told the story for her. A story of loyalty, of courage, of a brother who had commanded respect and a family who carried that respect forward. The bikers could see it, and it unsettled them in a way that words never could. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft hiss of a cooling engine and the faint rustle of the breeze through the leaves of a nearby tree. The laughter that had seemed so unstoppable earlier was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. Each biker processed the revelation differently. Some stared at the patch with recognition, some at the girl with cautious admiration, and some simply tried to mask their shock with a casual cough or a shuffle of boots against gravel. Finally, the scarred man broke the silence, though carefully, almost reverently. That's an Iron Raven's patch, he said slowly, his tone almost a whisper. You're his sister. The girl nodded slightly, not a word more, letting the weight of the truth settle over them. The atmosphere in the lot had shifted entirely. The mocking, dangerous air they had brought with them was gone, replaced by a recognition that respect wasn't just demanded, it was earned, and sometimes it came in the quietest, most unexpected forms. And in that moment, perched on her wall in a borrowed jacket, the teenage girl realized that she was never really as small as she seemed. The patch on her back was more than just a symbol, it was proof that even in a world full of roaring engines and harsh words, some legacies were too strong to ignore, and some respect too important to be taken lightly. If you want, I can also expand Scene 2 to 1000 plus words, making the bikers' reaction, dialogue, and tension much more cinematic and intense. Do you want me to do that next? Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of Scene 2 at around 1000 words. The air in the parking lot felt heavier now, charged with a tension that had replaced the earlier chaos. The bikers had stopped laughing, frozen in a moment of disbelief. The girl's calm, unwavering gaze made them suddenly aware of the weight behind the patch on her jacket. She wasn't just a random teen, she was a member of a legacy, and it showed in every line of her posture, every flicker of her eyes. The scarred man stepped closer, though cautiously, as if closing the distance too quickly might shatter the fragile truce her presence had created. His eyes lingered on the patch, tracing the winged skull and the bold letters stitched beneath it. Wait. He began, but he didn't finish, his voice faltering. It wasn't often that anyone faced him without fear, let alone carried the insignia of the Iron Ravens on their back. The girl's gaze didn't waver. She lifted her chin slightly, shoulders squared, exuding a confidence that was almost frightening in its calmness. Yeah, she said simply, her voice steady and unyielding. It is, and if my brother were here, you'd be on your knees apologizing for even thinking you could mock me. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The bikers' bravado had evaporated entirely, replaced by something closer to awe. The youngest of the group, a boy who still looked barely old enough to shave, muttered, "She's serious." His words were barely audible, more a confession to himself than a statement to the others. The scarred man ran a hand down his face, rubbing the edge of his jaw as if trying to process the sudden shift in dynamics. "You're his sister," he said finally, almost as if testing the reality of it. Recognition flashed in his eyes, quickly followed by a trace of respect. The others in the group exchanged glances, each silently acknowledging the truth they had overlooked. This girl, this teenager sitting in a borrowed jacket, commanded more authority than they had anticipated. You carry a lot of responsibility for someone your age, one of the older bikers said cautiously, his tone softer now, tinged with a respect that hadn't been there before. He stepped back slightly, as if making room for her presence in a space she now owned. Most would be scared stiff if they were in your position. The girl let her eyes sweep over the group, taking in the subtle shifts in posture, the unease, and the careful avoidance of eye contact from some. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the quiet stretch, letting them absorb the truth of the patch and the reputation it represented. Then, with deliberate clarity, she spoke. "You'll understand respect if you ever cross the Ravens," she said, her tone sharp and precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The scarred man swallowed hard, his fingers twitching slightly. I get it," he admitted, the words sounding foreign in his own mouth. He glanced at the others, who all seemed to share the same mixture of astonishment and caution. We didn't know. You didn't have to, the girl said, her voice calm but unwavering. Most people never do. But you judged me before knowing anything. That's the mistake. She took a slow step toward the diner, her jacket swinging gently with the motion. Every movement radiated confidence and authority, the kind that demanded acknowledgement without a word of threat. The youngest biker shifted on his feet, his eyes flicking nervously between her and the others. Yeah, we get it now, he said quietly. We didn't mean any disrespect. His words hung in the air, tentative but sincere. Good, she replied, not turning back, letting the patch on her back tell the story she didn't need to voice. She moved with purpose, her backpack swaying slightly as she walked toward the diner. The bell above the door chimed softly as she pushed it open, signaling her entry and leaving the bikers outside to process what had just happened. For a long moment, the scarred man remained rooted to the spot. He looked at the patch again, tracing its details as if memorizing the history it represented. She's got guts, he muttered, almost to himself. Not many would dare show that patch and walk straight into us like that. Another biker, older and grizzled, kicked at the gravel under his boots. Yeah, lesson learned, he said slowly. Don't judge by appearances. That girl, she's something else. There was an almost reverent quality in his voice, an acknowledgement that some respect could not be bought, only earned. The youngest biker stayed quiet, watching the door swing shut behind her. His expression was a mix of fear and admiration, understanding now the power of legacy, of symbols, and of the courage it took to wear them proudly. The scarred man finally exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. We should get out of here, he said, his tone low but firm. And maybe, just maybe, watch who we make fun of next time. The others nodded in agreement, each one silently acknowledging the lesson they had learned in a single, fleeting moment. Their engines hummed to life once more, a softer, less aggressive sound than before, almost contemplative as they prepared to leave the parking lot. The roar of their motorcycles, which had once signaled dominance and intimidation, now carried a different weight, a recognition that respect mattered more than fear. As the bikes rolled away, the girl remained inside the diner, leaning against the counter with a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to gloat, the message had been delivered without her raising her voice. The patch on her jacket, the symbol of her brother's legacy, had spoken volumes. It had turned mockery into respect, laughter into silence, and fear into acknowledgement. The waitress behind the counter glanced at her, curiosity flickering across her face. Rough crowd out there, she asked, attempting a casual tone, though the underlying respect was evident. Not really, the girl replied with a small smile, finally allowing herself a sense of relief. Just needed to remind them some things are bigger than appearances. Outside, the sound of the motorcycles faded into the distance. The parking lot returned to its earlier calm, but the echoes of what had transpired lingered, invisible but powerful. The girl took a deep breath, her hands brushing the edges of the jacket that had become more than just clothing. It was a statement, a shield, and a testament to courage. For the bikers, the lesson was unforgettable. For the girl, it was a quiet victory, a confirmation that respect could be commanded not through threats or intimidation, but through presence, confidence, and the legacy one carried. And as the sun dipped completely behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the parking lot, the memory of her walk through the lot, the patch on her back, and the stunned silence she left in her wake, would linger far longer than the fading light. It was a moment of quiet power, and in it, she realized something essential: strength didn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply walked, calm and deliberate, leaving everyone else to catch up. If you want, I can also create fully cinematic image prompts for both expanded scenes that match this 1,000-word version, perfect for illustrations or storyboards. Do you want me to do that?